Three, two, one. Hello again. I am Matt Davio, your host of the 1 Minute Trader Podcast, and I'm welcoming today a new guest, David Miller, who is the executive producer of one of the longest standing television market shows, and it's called Market to Market. David, you guys have been around for more than 4 decades doing this television show, covering issues primarily affecting the nearly $800 billion, business of agriculture.
Yeah.
And obviously, as traders in agriculture, myself, although I haven't been that active in them of late, I wanted to have you on a little bit and tell us a little bit about the success and why you think it is that the show has had such a long-standing run. I mean, you don't see, Jim Cramer's been on TV now for probably 15, 20 years, but wow, CNBC has not even been on that long.
No, and I think there are a couple of reasons why the program has had such great longevity. When the Public Television Act was signed back in the late 60s, there were only 4 channels really for anybody to look at that point. And so this program filled a niche for people that were either growing or raising animals, growing commodities, raising animals, or trading them and trying to figure out how to get a little bit more out of what they had, trying to increase the value of their product. And we've always taken this long view. It's a weekly show, which is kind of odd in today's I gotta have it right now environment.
Sure.
But one of the things that we provide is that long view. So we kind of cut back on a lot of the noise, and then it's just, all right, what happened last week? What do I think is going to happen next week or into the future? And how is that going to give you the long view on what you're trading? It's a little less than, okay, I see it going up. It's reached a double top. So now it's coming down, and I see this is a good place to buy. I'm going to go, or I'm going to sell. It's a little more than that. And our people, some are chartists, some are stochastic miracle makers. It's one of those where I hear them talk about Elliott waves, and I go to Google and I go, all right, now I must have an explanation of what an E5 is.
Sure, and that's up for discretion also, by the way.
Oh yes.
The whole Elliott thing, I've never been able to break it down to a simple understanding. And I do believe in the simplest things, no matter what your business are, the things that make it successful, I think have to be simple. Oh. So if the Elliott wave is simple for you, then by all means.
No, it's not. No, this is why some of the people on our show, if you've watched Market to Market and you've seen Darren Newsom or hear them talk about E5s and E3s and looking out into the future and what does that mean. And we've got a pretty broad mix of who believes what. For instance, Darren Newsom hates all USDA charts and information. Because how come?
Well, that's because it's only as good as the provider of said data, and I get it. I mean, it's just like, I think all traders, whether it's Darren Newsom talking about ags or it's Matt Davio talking about the Federal Reserve type reports, the only one that kind of matters is kind of that commitment of traders report, because that's pretty good information, but it's more it's actually great information for the longer term trader. I think it's not really the type of information that can be used short term at all. So, I would agree with that. I don't think there's a ton of great governmental data, the jobs included, the jobs reports. I mean, come on, GDP, they're taking out the things that are rising and they throw in the things that are shrinking. I mean, it's manipulated all the time, because that's the way the game works.
Sure. And I look at our guys and, sometimes the USDA report will have action, will provide action in there, but other times it's like, what's the weather doing in South America? And at a certain point, I think there's battle fatigue over the whole thing. And you look, like you said before we got started, the market's really, it's like pennies. It's commodities, wheat, corn, beans, nickels. I mean, everybody's now waiting around for that March report. that's going to say, okay, here's what we think people are going to be planting to see whether or not that's going to shift the market. And
yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's been a wait and see market really since that July crop report 2017. You know, you had a month of fireworks where we basically shot all the shorts, you know, that were short coming into that report. They blew up, you know, the wheat, corn, and soy markets, and then they came right back down and went lower. So it's been a strange year as it relates to ags. But you know, I want to talk a little bit about, like, you had a guest on, and you were.
One more time for me. You broke up there for a second.
Okay, I was just saying that you recently, I think your show today actually, you were talking about driverless tractors. You know, everybody's talking about Tesla and the electric cars and the driverless cars that are coming. But driverless tractors have actually been around probably how long now? They've been around quite a while, haven't they?
Yeah, experimentally they've been around for at least 10, but you see more often now. I mean, 5, 6 for sure. You know, it's the joke is always, while the tractor is riding, you're reading Facebook or looking at markets or whatever, because it's essentially going to do its thing and reach the point where now you don't even need to have somebody be in there. It's like, why bother putting the cab on if nobody's going to be in it?
So, I mean, I'm curious, you know, are farmers that are used to kind of doing that kind of for, you know, for their own, like, let me see where everything is, you know, there's some worth obviously to being out there. Are they filming that so then they can kind of speed through it later, you know, so they're still getting that kind of that touch data that they used to, or are they totally saying, you know what, I don't need to be out there anymore?
I think that you'll find the full gambit really now. I don't think that there's any one you can point and say, this is what the typical modern farmer is doing. I know farmers that are using drones to go out and do crop surveys. Or they're trying to find their animals, and they're using, instead of flying a helicopter, they're just going to where they think the animals ought to be, and they're sending a drone off to do its thing and look around. But I know that there are still guys that if they don't go out there and they look at the field and they touch and hold the crop and see what's going on and see where weed pressure is coming, or see where they're having pests starting to eat their crop, whatever that is, be it deer or cyst nematodes, that whole thing, it varies from guy to guy. And when I say guy, I want this to be clear, that's the full gamut. That's men and women, because there are a lot of women that are making the decisions and the husband has the job in town. So that's a fundamental shift.
Let's talk about that. That's an interesting subject, because I've always said that women make better leaders, better traders.
You know,
now
connection today. One more time for me.
Okay, I was just saying that I believe that women actually do make better, you know, risk managers when it comes to trading, and therefore probably running most businesses. I think that they have the right kind of temperament versus, you know, because they're not as emotional about money as the ego-driven male. Now, this is just my unscientific thesis. When did you start seeing, like, the head of the farm, you know, be kind of a woman, or 50-50 partnerships, you know, between man and wife, whereas they always were, right? Because somebody's running, you know, the house, she's the COO of the house if she's not involved with the business. But it's interesting that, you know, as you said, there's more and more women, and you know, the next generation, you know, my daughter, she's always like, I want to be a farmer. I'm like, okay, I've never lived on a farm. I don't know anything about it. So you're going to have to marry one. You're going to have to find one. Anyways, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been involved. The show's been on for we're halfway through our 43rd season. And I've been involved in one way or another for about 33 of those, and the last 23 or so as a producer and then the exec. And the trend that I've seen is it started off being more traditional, where the husband goes out, works the field, and the wife stays back inside. She does the books and handles all the financial end of things.
Sure.
The husband was still going to the banker by himself. Now, what I hear and what I see is there's a lot more partnerships where both go to the bank and talk with the banker. And that, not to say that that didn't happen, 25 years ago. I'm not saying that, but I see more of that now. And then there are a larger number of groups of women that I see that get together on the internet as for instance, Girls Talk Ag. Angie Setzer, who's one of our traders, they get together and they talk about what's affecting them, either that day or what the market's doing.
Yeah.
But that's become a lot more common to see what was considered not at all a traditional female role. You see a lot of women that own their own operations, and it's like, I don't have a husband, or my husband has nothing to do with my farming business.
So yeah, so you are seeing that. So you're actually, or maybe the husband has a job outside of the farming industry, or the wife does, where they're out there, doing something away from the family farm. What about, the farms? Like, has the size, like the number of farms decreased, and then the size of the farm seems to, I've worked with a number of farmers over the years, seems to have increased, and the size of the farm, and then the way they operate, a lot of people, have the land and then they lease it to other farmers, right? There's all kinds of different entities now. And I'm kind of curious kind of where the trend is and the type of, farms that you're seeing, and where is the growth today?
Well, if you look at the Census of Agriculture, which is one of the places you can go to get more of a sense of that, you can see a decline in the number of farmers, people that run operations that are over 500 or 600 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And the size of those farms increases. And at a certain point, you have diminishing returns. I do know farmers that have, or they don't own all of it, they rent the ground to do this, but between 6,000 and 8,000 acres. Well, at a certain point, there are only so many of you as owner operators. So it's kind of a diminishing returns. It's like you run long cycles during harvest, and it's really hard on you. And then there's the cost benefit. It's like, I'm doing that. Am I just doing that to make my seed payment from last year? Or am I doing this because I'm really going to see a profit this time?
Right.
And so it gets harder. I think one of the big issues that affects farmers, and it has for centuries, is farm succession. And has anybody made a plan so that I can give it to my son or daughter, the whole operation to them, and they can take over gradually? I've seen 3 generations work the same place, and finally the grandfather is like, okay, I think this is going to be fine, and I'm just too tired to carry on. You guys go. I'll show up. I like driving the tractor, or I like moving cattle around, but it's all you guys. You guys go ahead.
So you're saying the lack of succession plans has been kind of a burden then on the industry as a whole? I mean, is it?
I don't know necessarily that it's a burden, but one of the hard things is, and I think it gets difficult here. You as an owner operator, you've built this operation and you put all your heart and soul, your life's blood into this thing, and it's something that now I'm going to have to relinquish some of it. And for some people, difficult to do the handoff. For others, I met a dairy farmer. He had 50 head, something like that. And he found a kid that none of his family wanted to take over, but he found a kid that would come out and took care of the animals. And at 45, he retired. He was like, I can go see my kids that live in California now, and we get to sit around and read, and we can actually take a vacation. Because dairy farmers, it's like their idea sometimes of a vacation is they get to go to town one night and go to a movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's paper route personified. I mean, you're working every day, all day. I mean, it's a very unforgiving lifestyle, I would imagine.
Yes.
And then, so but I'm curious, like the succession talk, because I think it's fascinating because I think there's opportunities here, right, for the younger generation who don't want to live in the city and want to have space around them, and so this idea of mentorships or apprentice, call them apprentice. I mean, it's the same thing. I think about this all the time. People going to, like, there's not enough people, in my estimation, learning plumbing or learning to be electricians, for the next generation. It's not even really thought of as a consideration yet. These types of operations possibly could bring very successful careers to people at a much younger age, right? They could maybe spend their 20s right out of high school, kind of doing an apprenticeship, with somebody who is, as you're saying, maybe 45, and maybe at 50 they want to kind of hand the reins, take the financial successes, right, and share the risk with a younger person. So that's an interesting topic, and I'm curious, like on these boards. So now with women getting more involved, do you see this kind of changing and kind of talking about this well before somebody just dies with a pulmonary embolism out there, some random thing?
Yeah. I think one of the places there are, just about every land grant university has a farm succession program where they try to bring either family members together, and that's hard, or if there's nobody that wants to take on the operation, they'll actually hook people up so that they can get together and decide, are you a good fit for taking my operation? Well, I feel comfortable in signing paperwork that eventually you'll have everything. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the cool things I think about extension at any of the land grant universities, is that you realize that if you want to hand this off, it's not an easy thing to do, and you've got to get after it early.
There's a ton of things, right? And it's the same in any business. Like, if you're a tool and die shop in Detroit, right? There's the relationships with the customers, there's the accounting, there's the machine guys, you got these, you have a succession of a shop leader, a guy that's been around for 30 years and he's about to retire, and we really don't have somebody ready to, replace him. That's, all of these things are the thing, and in the farm world, right? It's the same thing. It's like we went from, 100 to 500 head over the last 5 years, and that may sound like nothing, but it's huge. And the next person really is going to have to, be really smart and advised on how to deal with this. So I can imagine these are real issues, especially when you get into these larger operations that, they don't just stop tomorrow. In other words, if if I'm running the farm and I die, gosh, who's going to go out and do it again tomorrow? It can go bad. It can go sideways and wonky really fast if you don't have somebody there.
There's a guy, his name is Dave Nichols, and his father passed away, and they had a huge operation. It was row crops and cattle. And the guys that had been employed by his father just appeared one day, and they said, look, let us do our jobs, and you can learn along the way. He's become he became instrumental in the operation. And I can't remember whether or not Dave handed it off to a family member. But like all these businesses, if it's tool and die maker or guys that are building custom machinery, or if they have a cattle ranch or 1,000 acres of row crops, it's a way of life. It's not a career. You invest everything in that. I mean, I think about the guys, it's like in spring and they're calving. You don't sleep much.
Right.
You're going to be out there a lot checking animals, making sure that, if that mother has dropped her baby and is the baby okay, or is she having trouble giving birth. So you're going to be out there in the middle of the night. And sometimes in the spring, it's still snowing places.
Oh, yeah.
So not an easy way of life, but there are people that just love that moment where all those animals are so important. Met a guy in New York, huge dairy state, and he was so wedded to his animals in a way that these were like family members in the respect that I'm going to take care of all of these animals. I don't want them to live in a bad environment.
Yeah.
I make a profit off of the fact that this is a dairy, but he was concerned about them all the way through to the end process of what to do with the manure. And he invested a large amount of money to make basically a three-level wastewater treatment plant. Wow. And he was scraping, he was taking the solids and actually paying to have that marketed as manure for gardens. So he'd really gone quite a distance. You know, most farmers, that's harder to do. You have a manure pile somewhere, and then you have to worry about runoff, and you have your manure management plan. But this guy was totally committed. I mean, it was.
Well, you know, I had an experience. I had an experience a couple years ago. I was taking my middle son to we drove from. I live in Central Oregon. We drove from Central Oregon to Las Vegas for a lacrosse tournament, and it was in February. It was late February. And on the way back, so to give you, and we went through southeastern Oregon, which is basically 2-lane highways, very beautiful, hilly, small range mountains that just go on, and there's nothing out there, David, right? There's no cell coverage. There's literally, you see cattle all over the place. So, long story short, I get a flat tire. And my car, I get the car up on the jack, which is a great teaching moment for my, then he was probably 13-year-old son.
Sure.
I get it up on the jack, and I get the tire off, and the tire that's there to replace has the wrong size lug nuts.
Oh gosh. Oh my.
Okay, so and it's getting cold. It's getting dark now. It's like 4 o'clock.
Sure.
Thankfully, we broke down right in front of a ranch gate. So we sat there. A woman came by. She went to Burns, like an hour and a half away. That was the next city.
Okay.
She told somebody. I said, just call AAA when you can. I can't get a service. I can't even dial.
Sure.
She called. Apparently, and then somebody else came by and saw that we weren't there, or she came back that way, and she ended up calling AAA and calling them off. And I'm like, oh, long story short, while that was happening, the ranchers came back from their day, and they took us where they had a phone, and I had to call. It was literally, from the road to their workshop where they had, where they started their day. It was about a 4-mile drive in.
No doubt.
Well, right. So we're in the pickup truck bouncing all over, and semi-rutted road all over the place. And but I got to, I said, well, how big is this farm? Well, they hundreds of thousands of acres. I mean, they had over 15,000 head of cattle. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, just one of the bigger operations, definitely in the state and possibly, in the whole Northwest. And but what I got out of that experience is talking to these ranchers, like, these guys, they live it, they love it. They're, and like I said, it's all foreign to me. And it's so, I could see the spiritual piece of it for anybody that works in it, right? You have a lot of time, and as you said, you're in it for the long haul. So I get why, bringing this back to market, I get why people watch it, because that's the pace, right? And they're used to the repetition, and they're used to, this is part of my life. The show is I can expect it. I'm going to see it over and over again. I may trade, I may not trade. That's a whole different story, but it fits the pace of the long scope, farmer.
It is a lifestyle. We joke about television being a lifestyle and not being just a job you do between 7 and 3:30. But mm-hmm. These guys, it's forever. They do it all the time. And one of the things that market does is the first half of the show is news stories, usually out of Washington, that affect those of us that live and work in rural America. And then the middle 6 minutes is 6.5 is a feature story that we do on either an entrepreneurial venture or on somebody's new profile kind of thing. And so for me, for instance, because of this program, I've been to 44 of the lower 48 states.
For the show, just for the show.
The entire U.S. is our palette. So when the guys, and there are 5 others that work with me on this program, I might be the exec, but it's that moment where they come to me and they're like, hey, I want to go here and I want to work on this. And we just did a story on opioids. There was a guy, one of the guys on the team went and did something on ginseng in Wisconsin. I had a guy in New York working on this program called City Harvest, where they go around and they bring expired food or food that's about to be just thrown away in the landfill, and how it's redistributed in the city. But we've done stories like that in California and Oregon. I was in Tillamook at one point and working on one of the.
Did you go to the cheese factory?
No, funny, didn't go to the cheese factory that time, but we ended up working with a lot of dairymen that sent their stuff there. Yeah. And the joke was, where's the air museum? And they have a huge dirigible hangar.
Oh, it's awesome. They had, matter of fact, don't they have the Howard Hughes, the plane that did the first sea landing, I think. And
they don't have the Spruce Goose there, but they have all sorts of other stuff. I mean, I'm an airplane buff, so for us, we went to a thing called Mead, which was essentially a factory where they brought in manure and they made power and they made fertilizer, and then they took the slurry and sent it back up the hill, and then the farmers could inject it in their fields, and it was all set up in such a way that it took into account all of the manure rules in the state of Oregon, which are really strict. As you know, that's like, you can't pollute in here. What are you doing?
No, and especially in a place like the Oregon coast, which is where Tillamook is. People don't realize the thing about the Oregon coast is it's pristine. Like, it's not built out. It's basically all state land. It's not, like, you can't develop on it rarely.
No, and I shot some stuff in Vermont. There was a guy who deer was a really big thing for a while. Venison steaks in New York restaurants. So we're in Vermont, and it's pretty rural. And you could tell right where New Hampshire was because it was built out. There were houses on the hillsides. And literally, there was a lot where it was like nothing, 500 houses. And they were like, so I think that the coast of Oregon is beautiful. We went down to, the Three Rocks that's at the end of the trees. We shot video down there. And it's just, that's wonderful. That's a beautiful place.
Yeah, and if you're a golfer, Bandon Dunes is on the southern coast also, and that's just it's phenomenal. And their theme is a good walk spoiled, because they don't even allow golf carts. I mean, you have to walk and get a caddy. It's pretty cool.
That's cool. Yeah, I like to play golf when I get a chance.
Yeah, so Bandon Dunes has, I think, 6 or 7 courses now, and it was the founder and CEO of American Greetings Cards who developed the land out of Chicago. Wow. So he wanted to do it somewhere on Lake Michigan, but he couldn't find like the perfect, spot. And then he came to Southern Oregon, like you said, and on the coast, and he was just like, oh, this is Scotland. Totally. This is like, because, because you can play year round. The thing about the Oregon coast is it rarely snows, right? It's the same weather in March as it is in August. I mean, it really can be, it can be 55, 60. So, let's touch a little bit on technology. What are some of the things that you've been most impressed with on the stories that you've done?
Well, I think
as far as technology and farming.
Some of the innovations that have been made, there was a gentleman that I encountered, and he was using solar panels to make hydrogen, and then he was running conventional tractors with hydrogen. Incredibly experimental, just something that he wanted to try and do. And he'd been a NASA scientist. He worked at the Jet Propulsion Lab, and so he
took that knowledge and brought it into the farm. That's cool.
And it's his farm that was his father's farm. He didn't want to be a farmer. That wasn't what he wanted to do. But he was using the technology at his place. And so that's some of the wilder experiments, but things that I've watched, like power generation, where solar cells are totally what you would do if you were trying to run a pump somewhere out in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't necessarily want to put a Jenny out there because it's exposed to the weather.
Right.
I think just the general improvements that engineers have made on tractors and efficiencies in engines, and everybody's trying to figure out, it's like, I don't want to spend a lot of money on my gear, but I'm going to have to spend something to make money. And so when you're making $150,000 investment in a combine that you use 8 weeks a year,
that's crazy.
Yeah, you want to make sure that A, it's going to be a good investment, and B, that it's going to be really efficient in what comes next.
So I'm curious, has anybody tried to do any type of Uber for combines, some type of like sharing system, or is it not really possible because you need them at the same time?
You'd be surprised the number of custom cutters that are out there. There are guys that start in Minnesota and cut wheat all the way down south. They take one combine, and by the time they reach Texas, the wheels are shot, everything's been rubbed thin, and they just sort of leave them. They send them
really
after that. And that's in one season. And there's enough work to work all the way south like that every year and do that.
So it's like a traveling nurse, except I'm a traveling custom cutter is what you called it. And it's the guy who's driving the combine, and he'll start, like you said, at your farm, and then as the weather, gets a little bit better, he's, probably working his way. It makes sense that he's going south. Yeah, that's cool.
It's so much easier. You don't have that personal investment, and you just kind of work it into your flow. A guy I met who didn't own combines, but he'd started raising hogs in North Dakota. North Dakota was having, a couple of years ago, North Dakota was having difficulty. And North Dakota farmers, instead of falling into a farm crisis like happened in the Midwest in the 1980s, the bankers in North Dakota said, all right, look, we're just going to start denying loans. Hardest thing to do. You're a member of the community. You're integral in how things run, Main Street, everything rotates. Not so much around you, but you're certainly in that orbit of how things get done. And they just started telling farmers, nope, we're not going to give you money, and you got to sell. And so there was a guy that I spoke to, and he said, you can't make a decision like we used to by the seat of your pants or a shoebox full of receipts. You have to have a computer, and you have to have software that helps you calculate how much everything is worth. I mean, it is such a high-tech world. I think there's still that misconception by people that farming is kind of a thing that you do, and it's so much a business. I mean,
it's a big business, yeah.
Oh, it's huge.
And I would say one with insane risk because because of the cycles of weather and the anomalies every day. Like you literally, I mean, how do you know what's going to be there tomorrow, right? I mean, it's a tough spot.
It's tough. You can plan out, it's like animals. You can kind of plan out, when they're going to be ready to go to market, but then is the market going to be there? And if you're watching what's going on and you're figuring, oh, well, this is going to be an opportunity to get in, you and 1,000 of your closest friends are on that same path. So
do you see the same type of herd, no pun intended, but do you see that same type of herd behavior? I mean, it appears, like I said, if we look back to that last July USDA report, that we actually did see that everybody rushed from, this to beans. And then, now they're rushing back to, who knows, maybe they're going to rush back to corn. Do you see this type of like buying at the top and selling at the bottom type behavior and making these big decisions like this?
Well, I think it varies from person to person. I've seen, there's the old joke. It's like, are you going to sell? Corn's at $4. Are you going to sell? And it's like, no, it could go higher. And then it's that, well, I lost, X amount on paper. Well, it's like if you'd sold at $4. So do I see that sort of herd mentality where like a bunch of guys will get in? Not necessarily. There are a lot of guys that are being smart about what they're doing, and they may only sell a third at that price. They'll lock in prices. it's like doing futures. You lock in, several months down the road, where's the good price? It might be December of 18 instead of March of 18. That's where the good price is. So you try to lock in. And a lot of guys they sell the physical and then they'll buy back on paper. But there are also people that, hey, have storage and they'll hold it until they see a price that they like. So I think that there are lots of mentality, different thought processes with all of this.
And would you say that what percentage of farmers use futures now to manage that risk? Is it 100%? Is it?
No, I don't think it's 100%. I think there's a large percentage. I wouldn't want to hazard a guess because I'd probably be off the mark, but I know that it happens a lot more. But there's still guys. There are a couple that I know that they trade. They only work in cash. That's it. When the market is where they want it, they sell. And now, take for instance, there was a company called, it wasn't Valero, it was Sun Energy, I think is what the name of the ethanol company was. They were trying to hedge their corn. That's part of the way that with ethanol that you're going to make more money is you hedge what you're bringing in to a certain degree. You don't want to hedge all of it because you need product to send out the door. Well, they made a shot at something that didn't pan out, and they couldn't get out from under it. And so that's when Valero Energy bought up a lot of Sun's properties and then ready source ethanol. But say that, like X percentage does this, and I don't know. I know that the guys that we bring in to do analysis every week, they say the funds really drive certain markets. Cattle is one, live cattle. You might be in the 170 range on the board, but you're only getting 122 when you take an animal in to be processed.
Right.
So the funds are driving that a little bit more. But this is, like I say, this is why we have 12 analysts to come in and look at the marketplace and go, I think this is going to happen.
How big of has weather become like the primary technical indicator for, do you think? Has it always been the primary technical indicator for this business? Like, cause I don't, when I trade, I don't even consider it unless there's some anomaly. But
I think one of the things now is we're stuck and we're range bound on prices. I don't have to tell you that, you've seen it, but they're looking now at weather. And I think the weather markets come around annually anyway, because there's nothing else to move the market. You got a harvest market, it's going to drive the price down.
Right.
You're hoping for that weather anomaly that's going to bump the price up. But it's like most of the trade knows where all the grain is right now. Yep. And they're looking for something too that's going to move that product. So, I don't know whether or not it's going to be what kind of.
What about interest rates? Do you see that becoming an issue and possibly being a driver? When I look at most of everything on the board, from oil to natural gas, have had huge runs recently, say the last 6 months, right? And I think a lot of that is dollar devaluing, interest rates peaking up. Still, last time we were at 4%, I was looking. It was 2008, on the 10-year. So, and we're at 2.6 now. So, we're not going to get there. We're not going to get to 4% anytime fast, even if Yellen raises in her next, meeting, her last meeting, by the way, which I would guess she will. She's got to. But do you think at some point that becomes a real factor in driving price higher on the grain side?
I don't know if it'll drive price higher, because when I've asked the question of our analysts, where are we here? With the dollar at one of the lowest levels in 3 years at this point, it makes
broke to 89s today, by the way.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yep.
Pardon my language.
That's right.
But it was at that rate, that should make our grain more attractive and our commodities more attractive. But it's not, I'm still stumped. It's like, this should make our stuff more attractive, but there's so much of it.
Right. Well, see, so I agree with you. Like, that's like fundamentally, I'm like, I think there's a long story here, right? I think you want
Yes.
to own the grain. I think you do want to own the grains. I don't happen to right now, but I want to. And I'm thinking, this is the way the trader thinks. I'm like, okay, who can they trap? We're way short, but we're not crazy short, right? The commitment of traders it's not like super scary.
No.
So, but I think we probably have to get them a little shorter, and the only way they can get them shorter is by going lower. Okay.
Yeah.
So
now we're into the Ouija board that I stay away from on purpose.
well, but this is the way markets work. Markets don't go, and I feel the same way about the dollar. Like everybody's short the dollar now.
Yeah.
And I think long term, we can talk about this until we're blue in the face. It's going to go, the dollar will not be the world's currency at some point, but it still is.
Yeah.
And so where can the trap happen there? It's everybody's short right now at the wrong time. And so they're kind of the same story, right? But we're not quite short enough on the grains. So we got to go lower. And that's, it's again, people get in at they get in at the bottom. They get in at the top, right? That's just how the majority, and that's the way markets work. And so perversely, as a trader, you have to think this way. And if you can't understand who is trapped or nobody, there's times when we're neutral and nobody's trapped, don't trade it. But when you can kind of see that trap kind of playing out, it's the hardest thing to do, but so part of me I want to be long, but I'm trying to hold for a lower price, right? Because I think they have to get more shorts trapped. And so that means pushing it down lower. And I think that's what's happening right now with the dollar. And that's why, I tie those two together. I think you're kind of going through that.
I think I was looking, it's like, I was trying to remember who this morning that they were talking about the possibility that it could go lower, that the prices could go lower. Now, I had a boss at one time on this show who always looked at me. He was like, well, David, cure for high price or cure for low prices is low prices. Because somewhere at some point, people are going to start going, all right, that's it. That's where I'm going to get in. And then as everybody else, it's this market.
Well, as the trap, you need the trap to spring it, right? That's the thing, and it's the same thing, it's the same thing in the dollar. We're going to trap a lot of people soon here in the dollar. I think oil is a trap right now, on the upside. Everybody's long oil. We're going back to 100. I'm like, maybe, but not until we got to hurt enough, because we've got, I think, maybe the biggest number of oil longs on the commitment report than we've ever had, ever. So, and everything, the wind is at their back right now with the Saudis and OPEC and the whole BS and the games that are played there on the intervention side. Everything, you can't get any more favorable. So be careful out there. Be careful if you're chasing oil at 65, which it just was shy of today, up to 100. Again, that may be a longer term. I don't know. I don't see oil back at 100. We have so much oil. It's the same thing. So like, it's finagled right now. So I'm just curious though, where you see, what are some of the things, that you could see maybe that, I'm not thinking about?
Well, I don't know. I've been watching, just as a journalist, I'm watching what OPEC is doing and their control over outputs. And it seemed like there was a battle going on for a while as to like, we need to pump more because we're going to make a ton of money up front. And then just recently, it seemed like voices prevailed, clearer heads prevailed, and they said, if we just limit this and we all stick to this, we're going to be able to control the price a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so, I remember the $100 plus days of oil, and we were all thinking, okay, ethanol is going to be a savior as a side to that. And eventually, high prices broke and it came down, and they're building back up again. I can't remember, what was it? Saudis were saying target price was between 65 and 70. Am I remembering that right? Mm-hmm. Something like that. But, I don't know where the breakout thing is. What I wonder is, at what point do we chew through, like, for instance, all the soybeans that we have? What product on the other end, and meal was driving price last week.
Yeah.
But what product is going to make us chew up all those beans and all of a sudden bump prices, $10, $11, $12 like they were a few years ago?
Mm-hmm.
There were one of our
those were fun days. 12, 13, 14. It was fun to trade beans.
Oh yeah, and
I was trading more beans than there was anything else.
Brazilians didn't have the product to put out there, and now they do. And with the weather the way it is, at least what I'm being told across Goiás and through all of Brazil and into Argentina, it's kind of like, I know that the trade is hoping that something happens. Either it rains and washes everything out, or it stops raining and dries up, something big.
Right.
And
some calamity.
What's going to happen? I mean, we're in La Nina now, so, cool and pretty decent growing weather, essentially.
Yeah.
Some heat days, but it's like, I'm not sure where the big break is.
Hey, I got a question for you. Is there any instances or a kind of a trend of farmers leasing their land maybe to somebody who wants to put these solar fields out there? I can tell you here in Oregon, Central Oregon, where we have 300 plus days of sun, a ton of these hay fields, which grows here because it's dry. Are converting. I see there's these huge solar fields have popped up in the last year. And I've got to think that either they sold the land outright or they're leasing it and gave up what they were doing because somebody offered them a lot of money. So are you seeing that at all, like in the Midwest? Is that anything that's happened? Like, have you seen people going, hey, I sold my 500 head of cattle and my rows that I used to do for 40 years because I'm making more money leasing the solar panels now? I mean, is that happening?
I think you see it more with wind turbines out here. And the leasing a section, and you get like a 99-year lease, but I know that it's got to pencil out. And it's working that direction. One of the places where I just recently saw a report, and we talked about it, I think in last week's show, or the week before last, the Colorado Power decided, hey, should we build more coal plants? And they said no, and apparently bids for solar farms came in lower per kilowatt hour. So I think there's going to be, in that part of the world, and when you look at Colorado, that's a lot of grazing land, really, more than anything. And but in places like the Midwest, like South Dakota or Minnesota or Iowa or down to Texas, places like that, you're still probably going to see more wind use. But I've wondered where that break's going to come. Is it going to be as solar gets cheaper, the power companies are going to have to buy in a little bit more. That was why in Colorado, it was one of those, well, we're going to do, let's see, I think it was a gigawatt of wind and 800 megawatts of solar. And it was cheaper to build those two things, that old phrase of, well, when the wind's not blowing and the sun's not shining, what are you going to do? With battery backup, it was still cheaper than building another coal plant.
No, I think it's, I think we have, there's enough regulation and there's enough cost measures to make it an affordable alternative. And I think we're kind of finally trending to that way where I could see, and we have, Oregon is such a big state. People don't realize, the size of this state. They just think of it, out there on the left coast, but it's at 4 seasons in one day state, literally. You've got mountains, you've got the coast, you've got the desert kind of where we are, and it gets even more deserty as you head east, and then you have the canyons again. There's so many different things, and we have tons of the wind turbines, in certain areas also, and we have the sun. So it just seems like a growing thing, and I just wondered if you're seeing people give up kind of farming, to trade that. Now I'm a sun farmer. I don't know.
Now that's kind of a neat thought process. I think in the places like Oregon and Colorado, Wyoming, where you get 300 sunny days a year, that's going to be more cost effective. But if you get closer to the Midwest and you get 4 really strong seasons of which, it's dark for a while here. I don't know whether or not the price per kilowatt hour is going to work out in such a way that it'll be one of those things where they go, yes, let's do that.
Yep. Yeah, I don't know.
I see regional power like that becoming something that the owners of those power companies are going to start looking at. Because I've always wondered whether or not it would become more of your building or your land becomes that producer of power, and then we take from you, as opposed to that centralized thing where we make it all over here at this one plant and send it out to you.
Right. Right.
So one to many.
Well, listen, David. The great thing about market to market is, again, you guys have so many interesting topics, and I would. Where can people find you? What's the best place, for people that don't get the show on their local PBS, which, they may or they may not, depending on where they're listening from. But where else can they find the Market to Market program?
Besides the 20 states that we're on throughout the United States, you can find us on the web at iptv.org/MTOM. That's one way you can find us. You can search Market to Market in your Google browser, and you'll find us that way. We're also on YouTube, youtube.com/Market to Market. We also Twitter feed, IPTV Market, and we're on Facebook. So there are lots of places. We're also on Instagram. We haven't done Snapchat yet. We've been discussing that. My social media producer and I have had these discussions. It's like, are we ready for Snapchat? Will anybody be looking at us there? So, we're still trying to figure those waters out. But you can find us just about anywhere.
That's cool. Well, David, I want to thank you for coming on today, and we'll definitely do this again because, I want to respect your time, and I know it's, we all have limited amounts. So I want to thank you for coming on the 1 Minute Trader podcast, and we'll definitely do it again. So I'm Matt Davio signing off again for the 1 Minute Trader podcast, and David Miller, thank you again for coming on today.
Pleasure. Thanks.